Good day, everyone. We are the Group 3, and we are here to discuss Chapter 3 Identifying and Managing the Costs of BPO. I am Michael Vargas. I will be the first reporter. This topic will help us better understand the full range of costs, financial as well as strategic. It will help us recognize and calculate the costs related to analysis, implementation, transition, and maintenance of a BPO initiative. Determine whether it is in the organization's best interest to manage BPO initiative internally or externally, and manage the often complex relationship between buyers and vendors in the BPO process. So the first topic that I will be discussing is total cost management or TCM. This refers to the process of identifying and developing a strategy for managing costs associated with initiating and managing a BPO project. So from the start, we cannot really fully project or forecast all the funds we are going to spend within a BPO project. But with the help of total cost management, we can at least lessen the potential for expense surprises. Because total cost management is a systematic approach to managing costs. It uses application of knowledge in cost engineering. So when we have total cost management, we can at least have a glimpse of all the costs that we are going to encounter within a BPO project. This helps us to be ready and prepared for all the funds we are going to spend. So, financial costs and strategic costs. Financial costs associated with BPO are ongoing as long as the project is active. Each project faces a predictable cost that can be forecast, budgeted, monitored, and mitigated. So, si financial costs daw, andyan lang siya as long as the project is active. So, each phase ng BPO project may kanya-kanyang financial cost. And yung mga cost na yon pwedeng ma-forecast. Ibig sabihin, kahit hindi pa sila nag-uumpisa, pwede na tayong magkaroon ng idea kung ano yung mga bagay na pagkakagastusan natin. And then, pag meron na tayong idea, pwede na tayong mag-budget. And then, dun sa budgeting, pwede tayong mag-set ng threshold for each phase kung magkano lang yung pwede nating gastusin. And then, pwede natin tong i-monitor. Ibig sabihin, titignan natin kung nasusunod ba yung budget, kung nasusunod ba yung plans para dun sa each project phase and then mitigate it. So, if may chance, kung pwede nating i-mitigate or mabawasan, so makakatulong dun yung total cost management. Pwede nating i-lessen yung mga expenses for each of the project phases. So next naman is strategic costs. The major strategic component of a BPO initiative is the relationship between the buyer and the vendor. Relationship costs are those that are involved in courting, establishing, and maintaining a relationship with a vendor. So unlike financial costs that is only involved with the BPO project itself, strategic costs kahit before pa tong project and after nitong project na to, present pa rin siya kasi it has to do with the vendor. So when it comes to selecting a vendor, when it comes to courting, so syempre mapapagastos tayo doon kasi kailangan natin silang i-convince na mag-partner with us, to sign a contract with us. And then we have to maintain that relationship. So, after ba nitong project na to, willing pa din makipagtrabaho sa atin yung vendors na napili natin. So, important yon ang pag-maintain ng relationship and doon papasok yung strategic cost.
First project phase. Analysis phase cost. The first direct cost to consider in the BPO analysis phase is associated with the internal staff that will be enlisted to conduct the assessment. So what is direct cost? Direct cost provides reasonable information to the management for decision making about the product and its pricing. By this, it will determine the costs that go directly into the product. They will know the minimum or maximum amount they must sell or they must produce in order for them na hindi ma-overprice or ma-underprice yung product or services na i-offer nila. It is associated with internal staff because internal staff are the ones who is responsible for gathering pieces of data and decision making before they like let it out in the public or in the market. Okay. Now let's go to cost of third-party support. Another direct associated with the BPO analysis phase involves third-party professional support that may be required to assist the team. In this, companies choose to outsource people or person from different companies that specialize a specific aspect or skill to help the business task to be better. To be better. Second is value of learning from consultants. Hidden costs associated with the BPO analysis phase include those that arise from lack of organizational capability to analyze the BPO opportunity. Learning from consultants and professionals played a huge part into a company. Without the knowledge and skills that they've imparted from you guys, um, it will create a boundaries that BPO can show you. Okay, the third and the last thing is mitigating analysis phase costs. Costs associated with the BPO analysis phase can be mitigated through a variety of tactics. For example, the exercise of mapping organizational processes in the interest of determining their suitability for BPO also reveals opportunities for engineering. So, mitigating means the effect of making it worse, severe, ganyan, or serious. Tapos, the exercise of mapping organizational process, the best example for this is the flowchart. Flowchart, kasi makikita mo yung progress nyo sa company and it will also help you build stronger communication and understanding in your company at nakakatulong din to develop new and better steps. Better steps meaning for the re-engineering. So, ano ba yung re-engineering? Ito yung to achieve a improvement in the business performance because of the mapping organizational process or the flowchart.
The second project phase in identifying and managing BPO cost is the what we call implementation phase cost. The result of the analysis phase is a decision about implementing a BPO initiative, meaning the decision of implementing BPO initiatives comes after analysis. Implementation has several phases such as identifying a suitable outsourcing vendor or partner, negotiating a contract, and the last one is the establishing a project map for the transition. Dako tayo sa may identifying a vendor. One of the first decisions any organization must make after identifying a BPO opportunity is whether to hire a third-party intermediary to assist with the implementation. Dito, ang goal ng isang company kung bakit sila mag-hire ng third party is to assist the implementation of BPO initiatives. But the company also can make a decision to implement in-house way. Ibig sabihin, hindi na nila kailangan pang mag-hire ng third party para tumulong sa kanila to implement. Conducting the implementation phase in-house can reduce cost in short run but may add cost in the long run. By the way, third-party intermediaries specialize in RFP, such as drafting, distribution, and response evaluation, can reduce the time it takes to identify a suitable outsourcing vendor. Ibig sabihin, kapag mag-hire ka doon ng company who is specialize in RFP, ay mas mapapadali pa ang paghanap mo ng mga suitable vendor partners. It also allows the internal staff to focus in internal issues associated with BPO pending transition. So, pagdating naman sa mga company who manages to conduct a phase in-house BPO implementation, financial cost will include the time spent in crafting an RFP. Kasi, syempre, pag once na yung mga gumagawa ng RFP ay in-house lang, kumbaga sila yung mga wala masyadong na-background sa RFP pero hindi nila specialize yung paggawa ng RFP ay mas mahabang oras, mas magastos. So, distributing it to vendors is also included in financial cost. Managing and responding to queries and evaluating to proposals. Walang RFP na immune sa mga question ng potential buyers. The international distribution are bound to raise misunderstanding and some clarification, kaya naman mapupuno ang oras ng internal staff to field those questions kahit pa legit ang company nyo. So, meron tayo ditong month-long process kasi tinatagal ng buwan ang paggawa ng RFP. So, sabi, nakadepende sa complexity ng isang project kung gaano katagal ang paggawa ng comprehensive RFP. By the way, ang RFP or Request for Proposal ay isang business document na ginagamit upang makakuha ng mga investors who will help to complete the project. Naglalaman ito ng mga detalye patungkol sa project na gagawin ng isang organization. A RFP for a specific program may require the company to review the bids to examine their feasibility, the health of bidding company, and the bidder's ability to do what is proposed. Sa implementation phase cost ng isang BPO, an RFP should include the following: articulates the scope of the initiatives, the expectations for service delivery, the qualifications of the outsourcing firm, and range of the services that will be needed to fully outsource the process. Pagdating naman sa vendor side, responding to a RFP can also be time-consuming and labor-intensive. As such, kailangan din ng responder ng additional informations or any clarifications sa loob ng response period kung saan umaabot ito ng 1 to 3 months. Matagal na panahon na kailangan to complete the RFP process. Kasama na kasi doon ang i-identify o pag-isipang maigi ang pagkuha ng potential vendor that is best suited to carry out the BPO initiatives. That is also the reason why it should have to 10 and above proposals from qualified vendors. The next is evaluating responses. The process of evaluating proposals from potential vendors can take a month or more. Typically, this process moves from scrutinizing the written proposals to actual meetings. So, katulad ng sabi ko kanina, evaluating proposals from potential vendors can take a month or more. Typically, ang prosesong ito ay hindi lamang ini-inspect through paper to check out properly. Written proposals are converted to actual meetings para ma-discuss yung other details na hindi pa naisulat doon sa RFP. And also site visits to facilities. Sa site visits, another time na naman ang makukonsume because some vendors may came from faraway corners of the world. There, the organization that manage in-house should assume that proposal review can take from 3 to 6 months. depending on the complexity, scope, and range of services requested. Hindi rin ito madali. Why? Because if you wrote an incomplete RFP, can create an additional cost. Katumbas raw ng isang taong sahod ng isang management level personnel ang estimating cost kapag in-house ginawa ang RFP. Not just that, there are the hidden costs na maaari pang magpapalaki ng gastos. Next one is developing the contract. The implementation phase of the BPO project will also have costs associated with negotiating a contract with the vendor and establishing a project map for the transitional phase. So, the next step is negotiating with a contract and establishing the project map for transition. In negotiating a contract, highly recommended daw dapat ang BPO buyer to work with an experienced legal team while developing the contract so that the specifications of services, deliverables, and remedies to cut cost will be checked properly. Next thing is the cost benefits of internal and external implementations. The cost of implementing a BPO project can be mitigated using a variety of tactics, depending in part on whether the implementation is handled internally or externally. So, nakakadepende daw yun sa kung paano i-handle yung implementation. Internal implementations will provide the value-adding benefits of increased levels of organizational learning and capability. The internal outsourcing manager or the management team will be dealing with drafting and distribution of RFP, responding to vendor inquiries, selecting a vendor, and initiating the BPO transition are also their job. Cost mitigation benefits combined with hiring a consultant to conduct the BPO implementation include a faster process and quite likely a good vendor or more effective vendor relationship. So, sabi nakakatulong daw yung pag-hire ng consultant sa pag-implement ng BPO initiatives para sa mabilis na proseso at pagkakaroon ng good vendor relationship with your company. So, eto lang po, hanggang dito lang po yung report ko, and this is Jumili Manalo. Thank you.
Good day, everyone. I'm Johanna Grace. I'm the fourth reporter of the Chapter 3 Identifying and Managing the Costs of BPO. Third project phase. The third project phase is called transition phase cost. The transition phase is one in which the business process that formerly had been handled in-house is wholly or in part shifted to the outsourcing vendor. Ang transition phase cost ay yung mga expenses or nagastos na lalabas during transition phase ng isang company. Sa tuwing nag-outsource tayo, may analysis and implementation. May kanya-kanyang expenses bawat phase. Tawag sa mga expenses na yon ay cost drivers na ating tatalakayin mamaya. Ang purpose ng pag-aaral ng mga expenses na ito sa bawat phase is para hindi tayo mabigla sa paglalabas ng pera. Kumbaga, monitor natin lahat ng expenses kaya hindi na tayo mahihirapan. Ang transition phase cost ay may mga cost drivers. Ang una doon ay ang asset ownership and location. The asset ownership and location driver concerns which firm will be better able to leverage people, technology, and other assets for competitive advantage and where those assets should be located. Sa cost driver na to, dito ina-analyze kung aling firm ang nasa posisyon na mag-handle ng tao, ng technology at ng iba pang assets na makakatulong sa company para makapag-produce ng goods or services na much better and more affordable than its rivals. One of the situation is when BPO buyer may want to retain all or part of its existing assets to continue to develop internal competence in the process. Existing assets means assets of the company existing at the issue date other than cash, cash equivalents, or inventory held for resale in the ordinary course of business, and including proceeds of any sales of such assets acquired in whole or in part which proceeds from the sale from the such assets. While internal competence is the business functions or operational activities that the company does best, it is also the resources and capabilities that allow the company to achieve profitability. Puwedeng ma-retain ng BPO buyer lahat or ang ibang parte ng kanyang existing assets. Sa pamamagitan nito, uunlad ang internal competence. For example, any firm pwede siyang mag-elect para mag-outsource ng part ng call center function sa vendor as a means of freeing internal call center staff time to improve the in-house operation. Next is depth of relationship. Depth of relationship refers to the cost associated with developing and maintaining a strategic relationship with a vendor. It should be noted that the commitment to developing such a relationship will be more costly depending on the expectation for value extraction. Ito naman ay tumutukoy sa expenses na kasama sa pag-maintain ng strategic relationship with vendor. Dapat nating tandaan na ang pag-develop ng relationship with the vendor ay mas magiging magastos depende sa expectation para sa value extractions. We can define value extraction as the capturing of value from other stakeholders, either outside or inside the corporation, by manipulating the competitive market process to company's advantage. Next is breadth of relationship. The breadth of relationship between buyer and vendor refers to the range of processes that are outsourced. In some cases, organizations outsource multiple functions to a single provider. Itong cost driver naman na to ay tumutukoy sa range ng processes na ina-outsource. May mga organizations na nag-outsource ng madaming function sa isang provider at meron ding mga multiple providers na ginagamit sa range ng iba't ibang processes. Ang desisyon ang resulta about sa breadth of processes to outsource to a particular vendor ay parehong may direct and hidden cost. Mas mababa ang gastos kapag single provider for multiple processes. Next is third-party involvement, a potentially significant cost associated with the transition phase of the BPO initiative is based on the need for third parties to assist in the integration of both the vendors and the initiating organization systems. Ang mga maaaring gastos na kailangan sa transition phase ng BPO initiative ay nakabase sa mga kailangan ng third party or other transactions na involve ang ibang partners to assist in the integration of the vendor and the initiating organization system. For example, kapag yung dalawang company ay mayroong complex databases in different platforms. Databases in real life are often very complex. A typical business database maintains hundreds of tables. Ang iba sa mga organization ay hindi pa nakakapag-upgrade ng kanilang system for several years. So, the vendor should be expect to provide transition management expertise for most systems. Pero hindi dapat mag-expect na magiging sobrang smooth ang transition kung ang organization na gustong mag-upgrade is outdated masyado or masyado ng luma ang databases and information architectures. In that case, third parties may be necessary to assist in upgrading and migrating the buyer organization's data to the vendor system. Process adaptation. Hidden costs associated with the transition phase center on the effects that outsourcing a process can have on employees who work outside that process. Sa process adaptation naman, pwedeng makaranas sa mga employees ng pag-a-adjust habang processing ang transition. Sa adjustment, hindi lang ito patungkol sa kailangan intindihin at bagong process. Kailangan ding makipag-communicate sa mga bagong tao at intindihin ang new systems. As usual for organizational change for this magnitude, some people will take longer than others to adjust and some will simply resist changes altogether. How the process reverses negative effects. Although organization change creates possible productivity sapping dangers, the negative effect is usually reversed once the organization is clearly pursuing its new objectives. Sabi naman dito, once daw na ang organization ay pinursu ang new goals or objectives, mawawala daw yung negative effects.
Good afternoon po. I am Joanne Ramos, reporter of the operational phase cost. The operational phase of the BPO project refers to the period when the contract is being fully implemented and performance expectations drive the relationship. So dito sa operational phase cost, dito na i-operate or i-apply yung mga project phases from analyzing to transition phase. Sa operational phase cost din natin gagawin ang mga BPO initiatives wherein it includes financial and productivity ratios. So what is financial ratios and productivity ratios? Financial ratios and productivity ratios is yung mga kailangan ma-monitor from its standard range to its ROI or return on investment and to its finish range na tinatawag na margin enhancement. For example, sa isang company, nakipag-partner siya sa isang outsourcing na company, is mayroon siyang malaki matutulong in the way na, syempre diba, ang mga outsourcing company is a very flexible, quality, and talagang cost reduction, knowing na dalawa na kayong nag-ooperate sa isang company. Also, in outsourcing companies, it has a pool of talented employees, deep industry knowledge, and the latest technologies to provide the most optimal solution for your needs. It allows you to avoid large expenditures so that you can utilize your capital for growth investment. While cost cutting is the most common reason for outsourcing, quality should not be impaired in the process. Often businesses choose outsourcing companies based on the lowest offer received. But the lowest price does not necessarily mean the best cost overall. A significantly lower cost can also mean lower quality. Poor data quality in business directly impacts your ROI or return on investment. Choosing the right outsourcing company makes a big difference between cutting costs and having to spend the resource to fix error. Diba nga sabi, mas maigi na maiwasan mo yung magkamali kaysa magsisik ka sa huli, which is mas maganda kasi kung magka-problema man, hindi ganun kalala. So sa operational phase cost, may mga factors tayong kailangang i-monitor. First, impact on productivity. BPO implementation will have not only a financial impact on the organization but also a productivity impact. The productivity impact, it must be noted, will likely reach beyond the unit or function that is targeted for outsourcing. So as I said earlier, di lang financial lang kailangan nating mamonitor. Kailangan din ng productivity, which is importante kasi ang productivity, it is a measurement of the amount of work accomplished during a specified time frame. It is also called output. Alam naman natin lahat na sa isang company, di lang mahalaga kung gaano kalaki or kababa yung kinikita nila. Siyempre, mahalaga din kung nagtrabaho ba ng maayos yung mga employees nila. Pero siyempre, mas mahalaga sa mga employees na kung ang sinasahod ba nila is katumbas ng trabaho nila. For example, ang dami mong ginagawa pero ang natatanggap mong sahod is hindi naman makatarungan. Pag ganun ba, gaganahan ka magtrabaho? Siyempre, hindi, diba? Which is pwedeng maka-apekto sa performance mo o sa pagiging productivity mo sa kumpanya nyo. Pero kung kahit ang dami mong ginagawa tapos makatarungan pa yung sweldo mo, syempre gaganahan ka. Pero syempre, di lang employees ang may karapatan. May karapatan din yung company. For example, working hours. Pero ikaw, kung ano-anong pinagagawa mo, yung tipong mas marami pang yung oras mong makipagtsikahan or break time mo kaysa sa oras na tinrabaho mo, di huwag kang magreklamo kung magka-problema man sa result ng performance mo, di ba? So, sa impact of productivity, meron tayong financial performance metrics. Meron itong dalawang category. Ito ay ang cost reduction BPO and strategic BPO. Sa cost reduction BPO, it includes return on investment, net margin, sales or employees, inventory return. Sa strategic BPO naman, meron siyang return on investment, gross revenue, market share, customer acquisition cost. It means na kapag sa isang organization, mas marami yung taong nag-work, mas mapapabilis matapos yung isang trabaho. Hindi siya time-consuming, mas marami ka pang pwedeng magawa. Productivity measures used to control the BPO initiative must account for these short-term fluctuations in overall company while keeping track of long-term objectives. The distinction in metrics between cost reduction BPO and strategic BPO is less pronounced for the productivity than for financial indicators. Productivity measures are fairly consistent for the organization regardless of the cost-cutting or strategic initiatives undertaken. So yung kanina is about sa cost reduction BPO and strategic BPO na under ng financial performance metrics. Ito naman is about sa productivity metrics. Organization can use several important productivity metrics to control a BPO initiative. It includes output over employee, overhead cost over unit of output, output over capital expenditure, and output over assets. These standard productivity measures will enable the firm to assess the pre- and post-BPO impact. The measures must each include a time element to account for short-term variation. It would be a mistake to pull the plug on a BPO initiative based on early returns that showed a dip in overall organizational productivity. Such fluctuation should be anticipated and accounted for before launching the product or project. Still, normalization or improvement in productivity should be expected within a pre-established period, and adjustment made to the BPO initiative if those targets are not being met. So, ang second factor na kailangan ma-monitor is the internal factors. Internal factors to monitor. Qualitative measures of the BPO initiative are far-reaching, including internal, external, and vendor-related metrics. Internal qualitative metrics will focus on a variety of issues concerning the relative health of the organization. Effective managing the BPO rollout will require data collection before, during, and after the process. Before the process begins, organization should collect data on several characteristics of the internal environment. This includes employee knowledge of BPO, employee understanding of organizational strategy, employee morale and sense of job security, and employee capacity to deal with change. So, itong mga characteristics na to is makakatulong para maka-establish ng maayos at malinaw na komunikasyon pag mag-i-implement ng isang BPO program. So, as I said earlier, kung ang mga employee sa isang kumpanya ay mayroong maayos na komunikasyon, may malaki itong benefit sa kumpanya. Siyempre, magkakaroon ng pagkakaintindihan, di lang sa mga employees itself, but also sa mga employees up to their management. And also, mas magiging productive ang mga employees kapag yung nangyayari sa isang kumpanya is pabor sa kanilang lahat. For example, may mga pagbabago na kailangang gawin or ayusin. Siyempre, kung ma-explain yun sa kanila ng maayos, mas mauunawaan nila at magre-resulta yun ng mga magagandang outcome sa isang kumpanya. So, ang third factor na kailangan mong ma-monitor is ang 3 key external audiences. External factors to monitor include issues related to customers, competitors, and shareholders. Organization, as a rule, should be collecting data regarding customer satisfaction. So, kanina, tapos na tayo sa internal. Ngayon, dito naman tayo sa external, which is very risky kasi pag mag-ooperate ka ng BPO initiatives, hindi mo alam kung kailangan mo ba ng customer interaction or not. Anong ibig sabihin nun? For example, may inilabas na bagong product si company. Paano niya masisigurado na okay na yung plano nila or product nila kung di pa naman nila yung nasusubukan? That's why, may mga product na food na may pa-free taste sa mall. May mga makeup tester, may mga sample products na nire-release bago maglabas ng finalized product kasi mas mahalaga ang customer satisfaction. Kasi kung di mo mababantayan ang customer satisfaction, baka maagaw yun ng mga competitors mo, which is magiging malaking problema ng company mo kasi nga, di ba, customer is your priority dapat. Regarding naman sa shareholders, organizations should also monitor the reaction of shareholders and other major organizational stakeholders to the BPO initiative. Kasi ang mga investors, sobrang strict yan. Gusto nila dapat may assurance sila sa lahat ng bagay at dapat lagi silang updated sa mga nangyayari sa kumpanya. Dahil syempre, pag nagka-problema ang isang kumpanya, magkakaroon din ng problema ang mga investors mo na pwedeng mag-result ng negative. Clear understanding of stakeholder knowledge of organizational strategy before and after the BPO initiative has begun can help circumvent unnecessary roadblocks that may arise as people hear about the outsourcing project. So, ang last na topic na kailangan ma-monitor under ng pag mag-ooperate ka ng operational phase cost is ang complex buyer-vendor relationship. The final qualitative data points that must be collected involve those between the organization and the BPO partner. This complex relationship will evolve over time as the BPO partner performs in its contract. Underlying each BPO partner relationship are the so-called service level agreements that specify actions to be taken to ensure customer satisfaction. Ito yung mga parang katulad ng mga kontrata para masigurado na nagkakaintindihan both parties, which is the buyer and the vendor. For example, sa supplier and sa manufacturer, syempre dapat may maayos silang agreement sa sistema ng production nila. Kasi pag wala, di nila maayos agad pag nagka-problema. Hidden costs associated with developing and maintaining the buyer-vendor relationship concern interpersonal skill issues. The needs and service requirements of an ongoing BPO will evolve over time, and the scope and the nature of the buyer-vendor relationship must adapt as well. A good relationship between the buyer and the vendor can result positivities like long contract agreements and good relationship or negotiations. Poor negotiating skills can lead to less than favorable terms on change in the original contract or in the provision of new services. Poorly crafted original contracts can lock an organization into lower service level or draconian pricing. Kaya sobrang mahalaga ang complex buyer and vendor relationship kasi dito rin dedepende ang resulta ng isang kumpanya. So, ang last na topic na kailangan ma-monitor under ng pag mag-ooperate ka ng operational phase cost is ang complex buyer-vendor relationship. The final qualitative data points that must be collected involve those between the organization and the BPO partner. This complex relationship will evolve over time as the BPO partner performs in its contract. Underlying each BPO partner relationship are the so-called service level agreements that specify actions to be taken to ensure customer satisfaction. Ito yung mga parang katulad ng mga kontrata para masigurado na nagkakaintindihan both parties, which is the buyer and the vendor. For example, sa supplier and sa manufacturer, syempre dapat or may maayos silang agreement sa sistema ng production nila. Kasi pag wala, di nila maaayos agad pag nagka-problema. Hidden costs associated with developing and maintaining the buyer-vendor relationship concern interpersonal skill issues. The needs and service requirements of an ongoing BPO will evolve over time, and the scope and the nature of the buyer-vendor relationship must adapt as well. A good relationship between the buyer and the vendor can result positivities like long contract agreements and good relationship or negotiations. Poor negotiating skills can lead to less than favorable terms on change in the original contract or in the provision of new services. Poorly crafted original contracts can lock an organization into lower service level or draconian pricing. Kaya sobrang mahalaga ang complex buyer and vendor relationship kasi dito rin dedepende ang resulta ng isang kumpanya.
Good day everyone, I am Elizabeth T. Alimango and I'm going to tackle the last part of our report, which is the strategic cost. Strategic cost associated with BPO center on the potential loss of organizational learning that results from placing a process under the control of an external service provider. Outsourcing so-called non-core process must be undertaken with careful forethought because it is never clear how future competitive conditions will unfold and what types of competencies will be required. As discussed by the reporter in Chapter 2, firms must distinguish non-core activities as critical, key, or support. So what is non-core activities? Are the activities that make the business run even though they are not directly related to producing the service or product which the business sells to generate its revenue. An example of this is mission and its place in critical process. It usually be retained in-house. At the very least, they should be outsourced only when the inter-organizational relationship is clearly focused on developing and deriving strategic advantages. Knowledge management should be transparent from the firm to other, and reciprocal exchange of insights should be considered routine. Furthermore, a quest for innovation in the interlinking of the critical and core processes must be paramount concern for both sides of the outsourcing relationship. In fact, the major strategic component of a BPO initiative is the relationship between buyer and vendor. Relationship costs are those that are involved in courting, establishing, and maintaining a relationship with the BPO vendor. In short, it is a bond linking and communication between buyer and a vendor. This complex undertaking can be a far-reaching and comprehensive as a merger or joint venture. The strategic costs that are associated with BPO talk about the potential loss of organizational learning that results when an in-house process is moved to an external service provider. There are different costs of a BPO relationship. Number one is direct cost. Direct costs are expenses that our company can easily connect to a specific cost object, which may be a product, department, or project. An example of this is if an employee is hired to work on a project, either exclusively or for an assigned number of hours, their labor on that project is a direct cost. If your company develops software and needs specific assets, such as purchase frameworks or development applications, those are direct labors. And there are different direct cost examples such as direct labor, direct materials, manufacturing supplies, wages for the production staff, fuel or power consumption. Next is hidden cost. Hidden costs associated with the vendor relationship are primarily centered on the impact of transitioning formerly internal processes to external control. These overhead costs are the ones left over after direct costs have been computed. An example of this is many outsourcing relationships, employees of the BPO buyer became employees of the vendor. This is often the case in data center management wherein a large organization such as EDS simply acquires the existing IT infrastructure including staff from the outsourcer. This transition from one employer to another can have ripple effects throughout the organization as uncertainty and fear are typically associated with changes of this type. Hidden costs are unforeseen expenses added onto purchases. Next is opportunity cost. An opportunity cost it is the cost of a missed opportunity. It is the opposite of the benefit that would have been gained had an action or not taken or have been taken. For example, a landscaping firm may be bidding on two jobs, each of which will use half of its equipment during a particular period of time. As a result, they will forego other job opportunities, some of which may be large and potentially profitable. Opportunity costs increase the cost of doing business and thus should be recovered whenever possible as a portion of the overhead expense charged to every job. Next is avoiding a cat and a mouse relationship on the strategic cost. A cat and mouse strategy is trying to outguess and predict outcomes and the opposition strategies. It is a relationship in which two parties closely monitor and challenge one another in a suspicious or self-protective manner, often because each party is attempting to gain an advantage over the other. Thank you.
Hi guys, so it's me again, Michael Vargas. So I will summarize the topic for you guys. So basically, the topics we discussed earlier, the BPO project phases, which includes analyze opportunity, select vendor, develop contract, transition, and operate. These project phases results in costs. So the BPO project costs can be direct cost, hidden cost, or opportunity cost. Now, the role of total cost management is to mitigate or lessen these costs. So that is why total cost management is essential in the BPO project phase or in the BPO life cycle. So that's all, guys. Thank you all for listening, and we hope that you learned something from our report.